Welcome back to the Writer's Block. We are here with Dr. Verine Shepherd talking about her wonderful new book. Dr. Shepherd, it's interesting that you said that your book is your thesis, because the writing style in some areas suggests an academic paper in a lot of ways.
Yes.
You start off with a thesis, almost every chapter.
Yes.
You start off with a thesis and then you expand on the thesis.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Is that your normal writing style?
I think you're right. It came out of a thesis, and because it came out of a doctoral thesis,
Yes.
it's going to appear a certain way. There are other books I have done for other audiences. For example, for the high schools. If you think of Women in Caribbean History, for example, which is designed for the 60 students, the language is simpler and it's more narrative without a lot of analysis.
But who are you writing for here? Who do you want to read this book?
I think the audience is academics, you know, people in universities, but also students who are at the upper levels of secondary schools and tertiary level students.
So people like me are not supposed to be interested in these things? Or?
No, I think that of course it can be read by the public person, the person in the public who is interested in history. In other words, it's not, if you're looking for a novel, no disrespect to novels, okay? Because I read novels all the time. But it's not a historical novel, let me put it that way.
Okay, fine.
It's not a historical novel.
No, all I'm saying, I think the point I'm trying to make is that, listen, if you're going to write a history, then you know, it is important, if we're talking about disseminating history, that everybody gets it.
Yes. But what I do, okay, so this book might not be taken up by a fourth former or a fifth former, but the ideas and the contents in this book would be put in a textbook designed for that audience.
How do you research a book like this?
Oh, wow. You have to, first of all, find out where the sources are. Where are Jamaican sources? Where are the sources for the study of Jamaican history?
Okay.
So I started with the Jamaica Archives because one of the things about doing an advanced degree is that you have to show that you can manipulate and understand and use what we call primary sources.
Yes.
So we have a wonderful repository in the Jamaica Archives out in Spanish Town. So I went there, also the National Library of Jamaica. In other words, I explored local sources.
Yes.
Too many of us run to overseas archives without exploring our own sources. But of course, there's a limitation to our own repositories. So, and remember I said I got a scholarship to the University of Cambridge, so I did the work.
Access to
right. But it wasn't a disadvantage because we are a former colony of Britain. So many of our documents are in UK archives. At the county level, like Cambridgeshire County Archives. I went as far as Bristol. So I went around the British Isles trying to find out where are Jamaican records. And you know why they're so dispersed? Because the proprietors who were in Jamaica, those who went back, sometimes deposited their papers where they lived.
I see what you're saying.
In their counties.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the contents of it, but there's an interesting difference you make about the pen system. Everywhere in Jamaica is called a pen. Nobody understands what these pens are about.
Yes.
Expand on the pen system.
Yes, but just before, I wanted to finish this issue of how I found information by also mentioning that the National Archives in the UK, which is located at Kew, is really a wealth of information on Jamaican history. I use, for example, the governor's dispatches. Now, we have some governor's dispatches here, but usually just the covering letter. We don't have the enclosures. So if the governor said to the colonial office or the colonial secretary, well, I enclose, please find a discussion or the result of my interview with whoever.
Right.
That enclosure is not here. So we have to, so that's why we have to go overseas. So it was a combination of local, overseas archives, you know, and secondary sources, previously published work on the topic. Right, so contents of the book. Why pen? Yes. You know, as you say, you go around Jamaica and you look on one of our maps, very detailed maps, and you see all these pens.
Yes.
And you wonder, well, what were those pens? If you go through Manig to Ocho Rios, you actually pass some of them, Haddon Pen, and you see the low stone walls.
Yes.
So St. Anne was an important pen parish.
I see.
And these pens, not just your full coupe or your big pen, right? These were large properties, not as large as the sugar plantations, but these were properties owned by sometimes absentees, mostly local proprietors, but devoted to the rearing of animals. And these animals were to supply not so much the meat market, even though that happened as well. But remember, remember the technology of the time. They were supplying working animals for the sugar plantation.
That's interesting.
So they are not investing directly in the sugar plantation, meaning buying up land, establishing the cane, having the factory. They are almost like adjuncts to the sugar economy.
I see.
Right.
There's a parallel industry. But what also is interesting is that it was not just when you're talking about what it is required to run a sugar estate, for instance, they would say you need X amount of animals, X amount of slaves, right?
Yes.
And X amount of land.
Yes.
So there was no difference in talking about the slave and the animals in terms of work.
But the pen keepers were the same. I think all of those proprietors, whether they were in coffee or livestock or sugar, kept their accounts in that way. Because, and this is one of the things I explore in the book, I wanted to find out if the pen keepers, because they didn't exist in that very frantic regime of the sugar economy, made, quote unquote, more humane enslavers.
I see.
The answer is no. So it didn't matter what the economy was, what the type of property was. Slavery was just slavery. It was just harsh and brutal.
What caused it for men to be so brutal? What was it?
I think at the heart of it was racism, economic greed, and one enslaved woman, Mary Prince, who spent her life in Turks and Caicos, Bermuda for a while, Antigua for a while, then was taken to England. She said her view was that when English people come to the West Indies, they forget God and all feelings of morality. Right. That was her take on it. What can I add to that?
Yes, there's a very comprehensive answer.
Yes. So just to recap, these pens were then enclosures. And it is coming from that association with a pen being penned up, animals being penned up. But these were large properties with enclosures devoted to the rearing of livestock and devoted to the internal market. And this is why the pen keepers are so important to Jamaican history, because they along with enslaved people and, working class whites, pioneered the internal marketing system. So there was a domestic economy, even though people are saying, well, everything was exported and everything imported.
Right.
That wasn't the reality of Jamaica. Yes.
During that time, though, the story of how slaves operated is a very harsh system.
Yes.
But were slaves able to operate differently? Were slaves able to sell in the market or buy or engage in commerce or that sort of thing? We talk about the informal economy. So there were two overlapping economies under enslavement. So there was this formal economy, whether on coffee, pen or sugar plantation, but there was a law in Jamaica which provided that enslaved people should have customary use of marginal land. So they had their provision grounds. And my research indicates that those who were on the non-sugar properties were more likely to work on, and to be able to have products for exchange in the internal marketing system. So enslaved people were very, very critical to the domestic, the emergence of a domestic economy. Was there a class system within the slave system?
Historians like to talk in terms of a class system under slavery, in terms of the enslaved people, but I don't know. I think the status of enslavement just equalized everybody. It's just that they had different tasks allocated to them. So we have people who are in the field, whether doing coffee or growing something else, growing the cane. We had people who were needed to be in the factory producing the sugar and the rum. Other people were in the house, whether the enslaver's house or some other house. Some were in the towns, some worked on boats and so on. So it's a division of labor.
Yes, based on the
right. No, but some people ascribe a higher status to those men who were in the skilled trades and the supervisory and management position, because it was a system of patriarchy.
What do you want us to get from your book? What is the most powerful message that you have to deliver?
I think I want us to mediate this model that Jamaica was one big sugar plantation. I want us to temper that thesis, and I want us to understand that Jamaica was diversified economically for a long time. Starting, of course, with the indigenous people. After their decimation with other groups, Jamaica was a diversified economy, and people made money in Jamaica, not just the sugar plantation owners.
If I took away from your book that we are a people who were born out of a struggle, one force against each, an interaction of two opposing forces,
yes.
a constant interaction, and that has perpetuated throughout the society. If I took away from your book, would I be correct? I
think you'll be correct, because one of the things I say in the introduction to set the context for the book is how long-standing is what I call the ranking game. You know, throughout my work, I found that sugar planters felt better off than livestock farmers. So the pen keepers had a lower social position in the society, in the ranking. Then, of course, the ethnicity was also important. If you were Irish, the English looked down on you. So that there's ranking at that level.
So we are what we were.
Yes,
we
exactly.
Are what we were.
And among enslaved people, if you were born in Africa, you were considered to be less civilized than those people who were Creoles or born in the Caribbean. So right throughout the book, I'm seeing this, and this is why I call it contested terrain. Right, everybody is either competing for land, that is the sugar planters and the pen keepers are competing for land, or you're competing for social space, that is just space to be. Enslaved Africans are trying to struggle for a place to grow provisions, to market and improve themselves. But the other thing I think we should take from it is that it didn't matter where you served out your enslavement. The passion to resist was equally strong.
Exactly, the passion to resist. Contestation.
Absolutely.
The passion to resist. Yes. I want to keep that as the last word of this interview. Doctor, I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much.
I'd love to see you come back again when you have another book.
Of course.
Verine, if I can call it Verine. So that was Dr. Verine Shepherd from the University of the West Indies, talking to us about her wonderful book here, Livestock, Sugar and Slavery. Contested Terrain in Colonial Jamaica.